Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. Not in the pub, yes, but we do have a confirmed return date of next week to a location that you might well remember from times gone by. So get excited about that. I'm excited today because I've got Christopher Hamill and I've got Pato with me today. Hamster, how are you? What are you doing this weekend?
Yeah, I do just want to say we're not going back to the original location, the OG location where Gav's arse crack was omnipresent. We're not going that far back. But yeah, next week, hopefully shouldn't be doing it like this. This weekend, I might be going back to Leicester, mate. But time will tell. What about you, Patrick? How are you and what are you up to this weekend?
I'm on solo baby duty this weekend. It's my fifth wedding anniversary today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And then tomorrow, my wife is off to Paris for a couple of days with some friends. So it's just me and the baby. So that'll be kind of fun.
Is that your anniversary gift to her? Like time away from you?
Pretty much. I actually played no part in it. It's one of those ones that was booked in like 2020 and now has been put back and put back and put back, and now she has a baby. So I'm quite looking forward to it. Like, you know, it'll be like a weekend with my best friend. So we'll do some fun stuff together.
Yeah, it does. That sounds lovely, mate. I can't believe it's 5 years since you didn't invite me to your wedding. I'm still bitter.
I know. And now, what would change? I wouldn't invite Chris either.
Nothing.
That's all.
Whoa! Superb start to the show today. The energy is all over it. Let's crack straight on with the football chat then. The question was sent in by Kieran Stanley this week. He says, which clubs and what business should already start being done by Prem clubs? We're kind of tweaking this into a little bit of an overhaul chat, I would suggest. Something that needs to change dramatically at certain sides, because there are a number of teams in the Premier League that are going to need serious work done to them in the summer, especially at the lower half of the table. So get excited about that as well, because we're not just going to be talking about the top six. In fact, we're not going to be talking about the top six at all, really, today. Christopher, I note down that you have suggested Leicester here. Now, we've done a podcast on Leicester as well, haven't we? If you haven't listened to that already, I suggest you go and watch our How to Fix Leicester. But what do you want to suggest about the Foxes?
Well, it was also in Kieran Stanley Six's tweet. He said, why don't you focus on a side whose season is already bust like Leicester? And I think the last time we did them was in January. We were contemplating some January transfers, some quick fixes. So not totally the same, but yeah, we might go over some well-trodden ground. I mean, 9 players out of contract in 2023, 5 of them first-team players when fit, 3 of them rotation options. So I think overhaul was a pretty apt term for the scenario that Leicester face this summer. And a lot of those players aging out too, or injury prone, or both. Not a great combination. So can't really be fixed by handing out 1-year contract extensions. I mean, to illustrate this, only 2 players have started over 20 league games this campaign, and that is Schmeichel, who is 35, and Sionku,
and has been terrible,
who every Leicester fan wants to see the back of at current. So they're going to have to spend if they want to remain in the hunt for European football next season. I mean, they might still be in the hunt for European football this season, obviously beat Burnley. They're a few games behind some of their rivals, aren't they? Still can't get their best 11 out for various reasons, and they are losing one of their best players in the summer, or we assume they will lose Youri Tielemans, who would only have 1 year left on his contract come the summer. I mean, it feels like they've given up on renegotiating terms now, and Leicester historically sell very well, don't they? So they don't feel like a club are too hung up on sentiment, let's say. They know when to sell in order to maximise their profit on Tielemans. They will probably have to part ways with him in the coming months. And he cost 40 mil, didn't he? So they're going to want to recoup a lot of that money. I actually think, question for you two before I bang on about Leicester a little bit more, I actually think he should go to Liverpool as a Jordan Henderson replacement. Have you two got any destinations in mind for the Belgian maestro?
I'm not too sure Liverpool would be my first choice if I was Youri Tielemans, just because of the number of options that are in that midfield competing for that role. And that's not to say that he wouldn't definitely start for them, but I can see Harvey Elliott's role in that side growing significantly next season again. Obviously, Naby Keita has featured in bits and parts this season. There are aging players in that Real Madrid midfield that if I was Youri Tielemans, I would be thinking, you know what? the slot's going to be open out there. I would potentially be eyeing up a move to Real Madrid. I think the biggest club in the world. If you can get that done and you can convince your agent to make it happen, join Real Madrid. It's whether or not Real Madrid want you, I think, is the problem.
You know what? I was pulling faces then when you said he might not get a game over the likes of Naby Keita and Harvey Elliott. But there's a few parallels with him and Luka Modric. So he might not be the worst Luka Modric replacement long term. So I actually think that's a decent suggestion. What about you, Pat? I know you're not as fond of him as I am, or you probably think he's more replaceable than I do.
Oh, he's extremely replaceable. I mean, like, the issue is with Modric, I don't really... I mean, he has passing. He's a good passer, but he doesn't have the mobility. Like, he's not a dribbler at all, or at least he hasn't shown himself to be. And he doesn't have the defensive positioning that Modric has. So that would concern me a bit. Same kind of goes for the Henderson role. I think he's got all the passing, but Henderson has actually been a really solid defensive presence previously, before this season. So that would be something that he'd need to develop. But if his aim is to develop as much as possible, then he should probably go to the club that has the best manager who come in for him. If we're just talking about him staying the player he is, I mean, that Arsenal link, him going in for Xhaka, that kind of makes sense. Like, Xhaka, not a big defensive presence, but pretty durable and basically just needs to keep passing forward all the time. Tielemans could do that in his sleep. So that would be a kind of easy role for him. But I think he can afford to have a little think about what he wants out of this next position. You know, where's he going to start? Who's going to develop him the most? What his strengths actually are? Because I think over the last kind of decade, especially with midfielders, I think there have been a lot of super talented midfielders who've made decisions kind of based on the wrong ideas, and they've ended up not having the careers they should have had. I'm thinking of Paul Pogba, for one. You know, these guys who just had a huge amount of talent, but it wasn't directed properly. So if I were Tielemans, I'd think, who is going to make me the best player I can be? That would be my primary consideration.
You mentioned Paul Pogba there becoming a victim of his versatility to an extent. I think that's also happened with him this season, Youri Tielemans this season, owing to Leicester becoming a little bit lopsided because their right flank has been so much poorer than it has been in previous campaigns. I mean, he was player of the season last season for Leicester, wasn't he? Most outfield minutes, most carries, 70% dribble success rate, first for defensive pressures. But yeah, his physical attributes have waned a little bit this campaign. That there is no disputing that. 95 games in all competitions over the previous 2 seasons coming into this campaign. That's definitely going to take its toll. And Samare, I did think we could talk about Samare a little bit because he's not really stepped up to the plate in a way I anticipated. I know he's still quite young. He's 23. There's a lot of conditioning that needs to be done with him. He still doesn't look that Premier League ready over the course of 90 minutes. But some Leicester fans have been saying that, you know, they wouldn't mind losing Tielemans because they think Samare will be able to fill his shoes with a certain degree of ease. And I think on current evidence, that's not really going to be the case. He's an okay passer, but I don't really see much else about his game at the minute. He really doesn't have the attacking chops of Tielemans. I think it's 3 league assists in 5,000 minutes. So Leicester are going to be losing a lot of goal contributions when they lose Tielemans as well. Do you boys have any thoughts when it comes to replacing him? I've got a couple down, but I'd be keen to hear your thoughts first, because it's fun to shop for Leicester, right? Because they can spend a bit of money, but obviously have to come in at that level just below elite.
I think they need to decide, don't they, whether or not they want to spend the funds they receive from Youri Tielemans on the central midfield area, to be honest with you. Just because you sell a central midfielder doesn't necessarily mean that should be the priority position to replace that with, if you get what I'm trying to say. Let's say they do get 50 million for Youri Tielemans. Is 50 million pounds better spent on the Leicester midfield that already has a Samare potentially? We've talked about not being ready right now to replace Tielemans. It's already got an Ndidi, it's already got a Maddison. Or is that 50 million pounds better spent on signing, you know, a centre-back that can partner Wesley Fofana? Is it better spent on signing a top-quality goalkeeper that in the long term can replace Kasper Schmeichel, who we've seen fall off a cliff effectively this season? I think he's got one of the worst post-shot expected goals in Europe right now, hasn't he? So I personally wouldn't be spending big chunks on a midfielder when I think there are more pressing issues across the squad, particularly at centre-back, maybe on the right wing, and definitely in goal.
I think that's really fair. I mean, if Maddison and Ndidi stay fit, then that actually gives you kind of a lot of leeway, because you can go for like a variety of different types of midfielder because so many needs are covered there. The issue is, are we replacing Tielemans or are we trying to upgrade Tielemans? I think it's not that difficult to upgrade him in terms of his actual output at the moment. So what are we trying to do here? We need somebody who could pass forward, sure. But I do think Soumaré can develop that. It's whether you can afford the patience to let him do it. And again, yes, they're going to get a decent amount of money for him, but I don't know how big their financial hole is after COVID. That's a big question. Because they still went out and invested. So, yeah, I don't know. I definitely would prioritize a central midfield signing because I think that would make the life of a Leicester centre-back easier. And I think they've done some decent work around the attacking line as well. I still think that Daka, Maddison, and Barnes is the core of a very, very good attack. And we don't even talk about Iheanacho, but when he's had to come in and pinch hit for them, he's been great. So, yeah, I think I would go quite hard for central midfield. I mean, Songaré, who we used to love in Ligue 1, has been really, really impressive in the Eredivisie. He'd be an interesting guy because he's not going to cost a lot of money. I think there are probably some interesting guys who are coming to the end of a contract in a year and a half or so. I know that Fabian Ruiz, he could be on his way out of Napoli. Great forward passer, historically been a really good creator, has also put up really big defensive numbers. So essentially he's played every midfield role at some point, and he's been pretty damn good in all of them. I think it would be quite a smooth adjustment for him actually from Napoli to Leicester. I think there are similarities between how Napoli play and how Leicester at their best have played. So that would be an interesting one. I'd quite like to see that, though he might hold out for a bigger side. Who knows?
Just thinking then when you mentioned Fabian Ruiz, I thought of Dani Ceballos as well if he's unwanted at Real Madrid. And there's some similar elements to his game. There's some parallels, isn't there, between him and Tielemans. At least the Tielemans of last season, who became a little bit more of a deep-lying playmaker. Tielemans of this season has had to do a little bit of everything, maybe to his detriment. Ceballos might not be a bad shout. We've spoke about Boubacar Kamara on the podcast before as well. I mean, he's a different profile of play. He would probably shore them up a little bit more defensively, but again, there is some similarities with him and Tielemans. You know, excellent rangy passer, good at carrying the ball out of defence, good at distributing under pressure. I think you've spoke a lot about Florian Grillitsch, Pat. Someone who can play as a centre-half in a back three and a CDM with excellent distribution skills. As well as one of the more interesting shouts I came up with was, well, I perceive it to be interesting, Matteo Guendouzi. If he was to return to Arsenal from his loan stint in Marseille, find himself without a suitor, it might be worth a gamble. Leicester going in, taking him. There's a guy with whose physical attributes haven't been fantastic this season, maybe because Marseille have dominated the ball to such a large degree in Ligue 1, but his passing, like a lot of players under Sampaoli, has been super impressive, super progressive, and he's really contributing on a goals and assist front, isn't he? So
I think that clause has been triggered by Pablo Longoria, hasn't he, at Marseille? I think there was an interview that he gave saying that they had already triggered the buy option at £10 million. So I think that it will be difficult to get Guendouzi off of Marseille the same summer that official transfer takes place.
Well, again, it
depends.
depends.
On personal terms as well, doesn't it?
And it depends what the financial situation is. You know, Marseille have had a lot of investment, but it looks like they're going to lose, and I think we'll come on to him later. Chris just mentioned him, Boubacar Kamara. So they might need to pick up some cash somewhere. If you offered them, you know, twice what they paid, that's still not that much. Like £20 million for a central midfielder who currently profiles as one of the best forward passers in Europe. On the other hand, he's a pain in the arse. You can afford to give him another couple of years, and then if he develops a bit more, try again for him. I don't know. It feels like you're probably safer giving Soumaré a go there. Another guy who would be interesting to think about if Brentford were to get relegated is Christian Norgard, leading the Premier League in defensive actions this season with 6.6, which is absolutely wild. He's also their top progressive passer, their top passer into the final third. He's got that technical ability that you'd expect from a guy playing at Brentford, but he's going to put in a real defensive shift. He's 28, or he's about to be 28. But that's okay. He could definitely come in and give you 2 or 3 years of good service while Soumaré gets a bit more Premier League seasoning. I think that would probably be a really sensible signing. And again, I think that there would be a relatively smooth transition between Brentford and Leicester.
Yeah, and we've spoken about other positions on the podcast, haven't we? We've spoken about the goalkeeper. I think I suggested Neubel there potentially if he was to leave Bayern Munich this summer. And obviously he's got that issue with the contract, and Manuel Neuer having the contract. Whoever signs the contract, the other one feels like they're going to leave, and it's probably going to be Neubel leaving. We spoke about a centre back as well, didn't we? I think, did we say Lisandro Martinez potentially in there as well? But there's loads of other suggestions on that podcast. If you haven't listened to it already, I really do suggest you go and do that. Do you want to add anything else on Leicester Hamster before we move on?
Nah, let's move on, bro.
All right, let's move on to... Should we move on to Everton? I feel like they are screaming out for a rebuild. Pat, I know you suggested them on the WhatsApp, didn't you?
I just think they're a mess, man. Like, I mean, this season is just... It's an endless succession of missteps. Hiring Benitez, we like Benitez, but it really needed to bang because the fans were not convinced, and it didn't. They had a spate of injuries. They sidelined Lucas Digne, which was obviously a big issue because they've now got the fewest shots from set pieces and the least XG generated from set pieces in the league. I think that has quite a lot to do with losing a very good set piece taker.
That's incredible, given that United, I think, have scored like 1 in 150 attempts.
Yeah, but they generate more from them. You know, they haven't gone in, but they're at least creating stuff. Yeah. But as it is, Demarai Gray is their top Premier League goal scorer with 5. He hasn't scored since the beginning of December. They're 14th in the league for goals scored. They're 13th for shots taken. The defense is rancid. I mean, it's just one of those things where it feels like it's been about 3 years now where they haven't had a full set of fullbacks half of the season, you know, where they end up playing a centre-back at left-back or whatever it might be. And I just think, I look at that squad and it's just, how did this happen? It's such a mess.
They've spent so much money.
And they're in a position now where they need to move a bunch of guys on this summer and really, really, really increase depth. Like, they need to get some people in who can cover 2 to 3 positions. So we've got a striker suggestion here, which is Raúl de Tomás from Espanyol.
And is this on the presumer that Dominic is going to leave? Like, I think we can all agree, right, that Calvert-Lewin's he's got to go in the summer.
Well, maybe, but the only club that's been really heavily linked is Arsenal. The only club that I think he'd strongly consider is Arsenal right now. And maybe they go in for him, but after such an injury riddled season, do you go and pay 60 mil or whatever they're going to ask for him? And Everton might say, we'd actually rather keep him for a year, get the benefit of him, and then we can probably still sell him for that same amount next summer, which, unless there's a contract situation I don't know about, I think he would be likely to garner at least the same fee next summer. So they may well say, you know what, we have enough money not to do this, unless the Usmanov situation gets even more complicated, which is a whole other...
But they've got to stay in the league as well, man.
Sure.
They've got to stay in the... Like, they can't keep playing like they're playing at the moment. That defence is just... Like, Michael Keane, I think, is an upgrade needed. I think they need a central midfielder upgrade as well. Donny van der Beek's not going to be there long term. I think that's becoming increasingly clear. And then if Dominic Calvert-Lewin does leave, you've then got a striker as well, like 3. That's like a whole spine.
But they went and spent a fortune on Ben Godfrey, and he's just, you know, being crowbarred in at right back. But I think central midfield is an area I would really focus. We like Allen, but he's got fitness issues. Doucouré still a defensive nothing. Donny van der Beek not there long term. Ali defensive nothing right now. I mean, he'll run around a bit, but that's kind of it. So you really need to go and get somebody there. And if you could get somebody like Grilic, who you mentioned before, Chris, who could cover in a centre-back role, I think that would probably be a sensible move. So I think Boubacar Kamara is your ideal candidate here. I don't know how much you're going to have to commit to him in wages to get him to do it, but 22 years old, has been a good centre-back, is currently a very good defensive midfielder, huge defensive output, really good progressive passer. They need this stuff. They really do. But I would honestly look at that situation and say, if we stay up, we're probably going to have to sell Calvert-Lewin to fund this. And I think you've just got to say, okay, or sell Richarlison, sell one of them. Raul de Tomas, I don't know if you get him because Espanyol have said that they kind of want his buyout clause. Maybe that differs in the summer from January, but who knows? I would think about Andre Kramaric from Hoffenheim. Available on a free transfer. Yes, he's 30 years old, but if you've got either Calvert-Lewin or Richarlison with him, that worries me less. Obviously has been a great creator as well as a great goal scorer, really technically adept, can bring people into play. I think that's useful. I would probably look at the free transfer and expiring contract market and really try and get as much out of that as I could, and maybe some loans as well. I think that's the situation they might find themselves in. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel a bit fearful for them, to be honest with you, because I don't know how they do enough in one summer to solidify the situation, and that's assuming they stay up. And I think they probably hired quite a bad manager for the backs against the wall relegation scrap. He's dialed up the intensity, I'll give him that. And if Calvert-Lewin gets fit again, that will be a huge boon, and I think they will definitely start improving. But Davis remains out, Mina's out for another month. This is not a good situation that they find themselves in. So if they stay up in the summer, yeah, Camara, maybe Grilic, maybe Kramaric, and probably about 3 other guys.
They need to figure out what their identity is as well.
Yeah.
Like, quite quickly. They need to figure out what the strategy and structure of the team going forward is, because the transfers that they've made over the last few years are just like random bodies, random names. There's no real pattern or structure to it. Signed under multiple managers, signed under multiple directors. They don't really make much sense. There needs to be a much more clearly aligned strategy at Everton. I think that's abundantly clear. And in terms of, let's say selling Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I think they need to be really smart with their money spending.
Yeah.
If Burnley drop down, for instance, does Wout Weghorst then have an option within his contract to leave the club? I would imagine that was probably something that was spoken about when he first signed for Burnley. Likewise, Maxwell Cornet, who's had a sensational season. If Richarlison was to move on, could you utilise Maxwell Cornet in that second striker role, where he's looked pretty effective at times this season at Burnley? I think there are also options in the Championship that if I was Everton, I'd be having a look at. Somebody like Jed Spence potentially in that right back role, where we've seen for years now a replacement needing to be signed. Likewise, Max Aarons potentially, if Norwich do drop down, surely his future no longer lies there. I think they just need to be structured correctly. Don't just be flinging shit at the wall and signing 4 10s again, like we've seen in the past. Remember that someone like Klaassen joined, everybody joined in the same position. It's like, what's going on here? It makes no sense. There needs to be some structure, and there needs to be some very, very clear planning, because if it doesn't happen, Everton will eventually get relegated.
No, I completely agree. And I think there are bargains to be had. This is a summer where feasibly Chelsea might let a couple of their forwards go for cut price fees. Arsenal could lose Nketiah for nothing. They would probably let Pepe go for relatively little money, and I still think there's a good player there in the right system. These are quite interesting options if you're Everton, and I think Everton need to stop thinking, oh, is this guy going to take us to the Champions League, and start thinking, how do we build a solid upper mid-table Premier League side, and then we can start adding stardust to it. But right now, we have to make sure that this is a team that stays in the division, because that's how bad it's got.
I agree. I think it's almost too much to cover in just a short little segment, isn't it, Everton? It almost needs a podcast.
Well, a little bit like Leicester. We've done a How to Fix Everton this season already, haven't we? So people can
update it.
People can go and watch that, because it's got worse, the scenario, since then. Like both of you just said there, I don't have too much to add, but it's hard to know what a Lampard player really looks like at the moment, other than that he does ramp up the passes per defensive actions, at every club he goes to, whether that was Derby, Chelsea, or now Everton. So we know he likes pressing. Maybe he pulls some strings at Chelsea in the summer. Maybe Brozier goes out on loan again, because I think Brozier would still be an under-21 player, so the new loan rulings won't affect him going back out for another year and getting some more experience. Maybe they pay a handsome loan fee for him. I know there'll be a few suitors in for him, but I imagine Chelsea won't want to sell, and having that bridge might appeal to them. Maybe picks off a few players that have been on the peripheries there for a little while. Ruben Loftus-Cheek. I'm really not sure what a Lampard player looks like, but maybe it's one of those times when he uses his little black book to good effect, just to solidify them. But grim grim stuff.
That's what he did at Derby, isn't it? And that worked really well for him.
Definitely.
Like when he's worked with those guys already. I mean, Breuer would be an interesting one, but yeah, it does feel like Chelsea are going to ask a big fee for him. I think they'll just try and sell him.
Yeah. Another team potentially worth talking about, Leeds United. Ooh. If they maintain Premier League survival, obviously they're in absolutely horrendous form. 5 losses and a draw in 6, isn't it? And the goals conceded is just off the charts, basically into the billions now. Bielsa's gone, Jesse Marsch has come in. Obviously this kind of was like a pitch like it was going to happen in the summer anyway, a little bit. It's not quite as much of a panic move as some people have made it out. There was a lot of reporting going on that he was planned as the long-term successor to Bielsa anyway. Obviously, they'd identified him from his Red Bull days, and he is this sort of intense coach, isn't he, that likes a high-pressing system, very much in the same sort of mould as a Ralph Hasenhüttl, as a Ralph Rangnick. But, and I think there are some major buts here, Leeds' defence is an absolute catastrophe at the moment. And when Marsch left Leipzig, their defence wasn't much better. I think it was sort of 13th worst in Germany, wasn't it? Like the expected goal difference has jumped dramatically since Tedesco's come in from sort of 10th to 2nd. He was all over the place coaching that defence at Leipzig. And I'm not being funny, without Liam Cooper at the back and without Calvin Phillips in that holding role, I don't see the changes that he can immediately make that make a huge difference in the short term, because he is in the short term right now. He absolutely has to start winning games and win them quickly. It can't be a long-term project for Jesse Marsch. This has got to happen within the next sort of 6 weeks.
Yeah, he's got 12 games, hasn't he?
And it's...
Yeah, and...
completely changing the structure of the press, right? Like he's going from They go from a man marking press to a zonal marking press. I mean, I think it is more defensive in that sense, but yeah.
But it's still Diego Llorente, and it's still Struijk, isn't it? And it's still not Liam Cooper. Yeah. It's still not Calvin Phillips. So as much as you can change the structure from man to zonal, if the personnel isn't of the level required, I'm not sure what Jesse Marsch can do, and I worry for him, in the words of Paul Merson.
One thing Victor Orta, the sporting director at Leeds, was keen to stress was that Jesse Marsch's his demands on the players aren't quite as physical either. So he might, during the run-in, we might see those players, find a little bit more form owing to the fact he's not let up on them, because his system is quite demanding, isn't it? But yeah, it's not as demanding as Bielsa. And his preparation tends to be a little bit more conservative than Bielsa's. So maybe he will steady the ship by steadying the training regime. But yeah, I mean, we talk about rebuild. At least here, there's a little bit of continuity, right? Bielsa's targets may well have been Jesse Marsch's targets. And the rumours are that they're still going to go back in for, is it Brendan Aronson, who they went in for in January in the summer. So good idea. I imagine and it's still going to be appealing to them, wasn't it? The higher ups, that the players would essentially be similar in profile that they'd shoot for.
They still need to rebuild in the summer. Let's have it right. A number of these players are not going to be there next season. Rafinha is not going to still be at Leeds next season. I would be extremely surprised. He needs to figure out how he can get Gerhardt into that side. Adam Forshaw playing in the correct role. Does Bamford potentially need replacing if he's not going to be fit enough to feature for more than 1,000 minutes a season? Like Calvin Phillips. If I was Calvin Phillips, I'd be potentially thinking about leaving in the summer. I think he'll have some pretty good offers on the table. The back line feels like it needs badly refreshing. I'm not sure the Junior Firpo experiment has worked at all. I don't know. I think there's a solid 5 players that need rotation or need improving in the summer for this Leeds side, especially if they lose Rafinha. And it's also whether or not these players that have worked so successfully in a Bielsa structured system, i.e. a Luke Ayling, who has come up from a division, I'm not sure even himself thought he could play at the high level he was playing when they finished 9th. Is he going to be able to adapt to play in a structured zonal way at the Premier League level? I think they need to really get the next bit of planning correct post Bielsa to stop themselves tumbling back down, because I feel like a lot of the Leeds players in that squad are still championship level players, but Bielsa had them playing at intensity and in a format that really dragged the best out of a lot of them. So I think there is substantial work to be done for Jesse March, but he's got to keep him up first, a little bit like Frank Lampard. Should we do a couple of fan suggestions, or should we move on to quick fire questions? What do we think?
Yeah, maybe one fan suggestion, because I think we're at 30 odd minutes. So
I mean, Val here has suggested Brighton, which I think is a little bit harsh. I know that there's quite a few players in the last year of their contract. I think 2023, isn't it? Trossard, Mopé, Basuma. But I don't know. I just kind of back Brighton to get it right, although it is going to be difficult without Dan Ashworth, isn't it?
I suppose it's not a criticism. It doesn't have to be a criticism saying they might need a few players in the summer. But Pascal Gross is out of contract as well. I think McAllister and Veltman and Duffy, you can add to that list as well in the last year of their contract. And Dan Burns has left, hasn't he? So Webb's been injured for large points of this season, so I can see why Val would flag them.
The thing about Brighton is they've already started this rebuild. Like, Brighton do a lot of scouting in specifically Japan and Poland. They often buy young players from those divisions, and then they loan them out usually to Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium, right? So they've got a couple of players out there right now. I think they've got a Japanese striker, Kaoru, and yeah, they've got a few guys there. So some of those players might come back next season, assuming they get work permits, and we start to see them integrated into the side. Mwepu's there to take over from Basuma. When White went, they had a plan. So I don't really worry about them so much. They've been linked with Nketiah as well, if they can get him on a free out of Arsenal. And their fans have said they need someone who can finish, and if there's one thing he can do, it is finish. It is pretty much the one thing he does, but it's not a bad thing to do. So yeah, they can afford to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more discerning than some of these other clubs, whereas Everton need to go and get a ton of guys, and they pretty much all need to hit season one.
Yeah, and they've got Moises Caicedo as well, haven't they? That they bought in. So I kind of agree. I think they have been slowly planning for this. I think they probably haven't been able to plan for the exit of Dan Burn, which probably did come as a bit of a shock to them. But they know that they're going to stay in the division this year, and rather than rushing to get a replacement for Dan Burn in January and getting the wrong player, hold off. They're going to finish mid-table, aren't they? And look to replace him in the long term in the summer. I think they're just a really smartly run club, so I don't really have as many worries as I do about an Everton.
No, it'd be interesting to see if Undaz is a useful player for them up front, because they have had a few misses in the attacking department, have they, in recent memory? Jahan Bash, Jurgen Lacardia, probably a few more that aren't springing to mind at the moment, but I think the fans are frustrated that they've not found all this scouting hasn't really unearthed a top striker since maybe Mopé. So it'd be interesting to see if he makes an impression and does. But yeah, looking forward to seeing what answers they come up with.
Let's do a couple quick fire questions then. Lightest one from WM13_14, who says, what is one prediction that each of you got wrong this season? I'll go first. I was having a look at mine. I mean, my predictions were horrible at the start of the season, I'm not going to lie. But I had Lukaku down as top scorer. Just miles off it, man. Absolutely miles off it. I had Lukaku down as top scorer in Chelsea winning the league, which is just so stinking. The absolute transfer bias there, man. It's just so bad.
Yeah, but it was hard not to get swept up in that move, I guess, when he was coming off the season of a lifetime as well. And
yeah, just didn't take into account that Serie A tax there.
No, and he felt like the final part of the puzzle, didn't he, for Chelsea? I probably overestimated Leicester's ability, if something, their ability to fend off injuries and whatnot. Like Brendan Rodgers' ability to come up with a plan B, because I think I had them down as 5th again. So that was probably my biggest humdinger in the Premier League.
Yeah, had them high. Pat, anything for you?
I know I got loads of things wrong. I'm just trying to think of a really, really big glaring one that springs to mind. The thing is, we throw out so many ridiculous opinions every week that inevitably 60% of them are horseshit. I was more down on Chelsea. I was quite glad about that. I think I might have predicted Liverpool to win the league, but I mean, I suppose that's still on the cards, but I don't think it's likely to happen. They've been by far inferior to Man City, in my opinion. I don't know. This feels like something where other people can go through our opinions and then tell us how stupid we are. They're probably better qualified to do that. Yeah, I don't know, man. But I'm sure there's a ton.
Absolutely. A quick one from Swagato then. Thoughts on the potential new ESL format? God, burn it. Just burn it.
I mean, nothing official surfaced yet, has it? But apparently it's going to be 2 leagues of 20 with promotion and relegation. And that's what... I mean, there was a lot of stuff that made it unpalatable last time they pitched it. But 15 of the 20 members being immune from relegation was one of the headline grabbers from their last, like, extremely ill-judged proposal. But yeah, the Premier League teams aren't going to go back to it, given the bad press they received, are they? They just won't.
Yeah.
It'd be just PR suicide.
The PR was just a catastrophe.
Yeah, so
the PR was just so bad
and
first time around. It's just chalk now.
They can't do the ESL without the sort of powerhouse teams, which is the Premier League 6. So good luck to Perez and the boys.
That said,
yeah, absolutely.
The new Champions League format is just as bad.
Yeah.
Just as bad. It's
grim, isn't
it's
it?
unbelievably stupid. I mean, it just shows you that the people in charge of football have absolutely no conception of what other people like about football, or what people want more of. You know, the same as the World Cup every 2 years crowd. Like, they just do not understand what fans actually want to see. And more importantly, 100 more games a season. If you want to see more players' careers end early, then by all means give them another 100 games to play a season. And we will see how many great players just see their careers end before they're 25. It's a recipe for disaster because players are already overloaded, and I truly do not understand it. The Champions League redesign is as transparent a money grab as the ESL.
And the legacy ruling that is effectively a safety net for a big side who's f***ed up domestically speaking. I think it would have been Arsenal that would have been the beneficiaries of it if it had happened this year. Is also like shades of ESL about it, right? Like creating, like I said, a safety net for the powers that be. Just rubbish, mate. And UEFA now, like, this is because of the ESL. This is probably one of the few times where they've actually skewed, like, I don't know, they've curried decent public opinion, and they've not seized the opportunity by doing some good stuff for football. They're just kind of like the lesser of the two evils at the moment, aren't they? But yeah, rubbish.
It is absolute rubbish. Right, let's finish with a personal one then. Haruki Nakagawa, great name by the way, says, favourite food that disappeared / you can never find.
Brain liquors, do they still exist?
Oh, they've got it, surely.
I reckon they probably would have been taken off the shelves because they're a fucking safety hazard.
Yeah, like turkey Twizzlers.
Surely.
Bring back turkey Twizzlers.
I reckon turkey Twizzlers are probably still available in Iceland somewhere.
Yeah, but I mean, now they've probably got like a skull and crossbones on them because like Jamie Oliver told us all that we shouldn't eat them. But they were objectively great. Fridays when I was in primary school, that was turkey Twizzlers days, and it was elite.
It's a lean meat, mate. It
is a lean meat, exactly.
Similar vibe, but slightly different genre. Turkey, drumsticks, turkey drummers.
You can still get those, man, and you can get turkey dinosaurs.
Sick.
Well, I was going to say Panda Pops. Believe that they're gone as,
so good.
Sadly.
School discos.
But so sugary, man. So sugary. And also bring back the E-colour in Starbursts. The blue E-colour that was banned by the EU. Bring that back.
And it's also...
Please?
It's also hard to find Tizer.
Yeah, it is really hard to find Tizer now.
Yeah, and Tizer's great. So what they doing with that? It's almost impossible to find. It infuriates me. And it's really hard to find Ting. You can still find it, but loads of places in South London that used to sell Ting don't sell it anymore. And to me, like Ting and Supermalt are the drinks of South London.
Also, Capri Suns are bullshit now that they've taken all the E-colours and stuff out. Like nowhere near the hit they used to provide. And bring back the Jeopardy with Sunny D. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going to drink that much of it and turn yellow, it's your fault. Don't dilute the taste.
Drinking Sunny Delight.
I agree, and I'm convinced that was a vicious rumor started by a rival company.
Definitely.
Yeah, corporate warfare. Love it.
Drinking Sunny Delight was like licking a battery, though. It was so powerful.
Yeah, it was class.
Yeah, it was. All right, that's it for today's episode of Sunday Vibes. Then, like I said at the start, we are going to be back in an old venue next weekend. Lads, if you want to promote podcast this week, you're both on it.
Yeah, it was good. We discussed like who might go down, and shock horror, 2 of the 3 teams we debated in earnest on the show featured on it because they've just been a mess for like 6 months. And I wish they'd sort themselves out so we don't have to talk about them anymore.
Oh, see, I quite like
Absolutely.
it. I quite like it. I think this is the most interesting relegation battle we've had for a while. I kind of like that teams like Everton have slipped into it and Leicester are on the brink of it. And
Who's your free pack that go down?
well, obviously Norwich and Watford, I think, are basically gone. And then I still kind of believe Burnley will do it. I think I said on the pod, I think I said Leeds, but
You went Leeds, yeah.
I went Leeds with my brain, but I have a fear in my gut for Everton.
I went Brentford.
Oh, get sucked in.
Yeah.
Oh, dearie me. Let us know what you think about the relegation scrap in the comments below. Who's going to go down? That's it for today's episode. Yeah. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.